Evening, everybody. Welcome again to SCAP Writers in the Room. And I hope you're enjoying this weather that we've been having now for about 2 weeks now. But I think it's game's a bogey. I think we need a wee bit of rain or something happening. So we've got a wonderful lineup for you tonight. 4 fantastic poets. And yeah, so I'm going to start off and I'm going to introduce Hannah Nicholson. I first saw Hannah up in Stonehaven a couple of years ago, and I was just bowled over by her poetry and by her delivery. And I have the pleasure of introducing Hannah tonight. So I'll read a wee bio of Hannah. So Hannah Nicholson is originally from Shetland, but now lives in Aberdeen. She has an M.Lit with distinction in creative writing from the University of Aberdeen and was a 2021 winner of the Scottish Book Trust New Writers Award. She also works part-time in her alma mater's library. Hannah, take it away.
Thanks, Donna. I'm glad you like my delivery. I'm a recovered theatre kid, so it's good to know that came in handy at some point. I thought I'd start with 2 poems that I wrote. They're actually a commission a couple of months ago. Matthew Fitt, that runs a website, school materials in the Scots language for like primary and secondary, asked me to write 2 poems for him and to record them. And they haven't quite gone up. I think they're supposed to be up on the website by the end of this month, but they're en route. But this is the first one, and it's called The Merry Dancers. I know it's kind of different time of year for Merry Dancers, but I'm going to read it anyway because I'm quite proud of it. We get out to the back green, we wear jackets, gloves and touries on, we're breathing at the cold air as we look up at the sky. The winter humming was thwarted by the green, red and purple glows flickering over the height of it. A stunning light show to rival any you would see at a gig. We were entranced by the beauty of it, the phosphorescence upon our heads, cheered in the cold of this night. I saw the een twinkling with tears, the joy they was finally seen this phenomenon, the northern skies dancing for us. They took some pictures, but no money, for they wanted to live at the moment while we hid it. Thank you. And the second poem for that same commission, it was actually inspired. I'm from Bray in Shetland. Bray is also famously home to Frankie's Fish and Chip Shop, which is the most northerly chip shop in the country. And certainly under their old man, I don't know if the new management still do this, but the old management used to put up a notice on the counter with a photo of the fishing boat that had caught the fish, and it would say the name and the registry number and the port they were registered in, and this boat caught your fish today. And I just thought that was quite cute. So I ended up writing a poem about it, and this is called Dangerous Work. When he gings out to sea to fish for a catch with his crew, I worry it he mightna come home. He'll be out on yon boat, tossed o'er the waves like ane o' our bairns' bath toys, cold and drookit by the waters, threatened by their dubes. When they ging awa for a run, I find myself panicking deep down, wondering if it'll be this time I get the call telling me they're going off the radar. At night I still put on the shipping, reassured when the announcer says, "Fair I'll good, occasionally poor." When he finally comes home to me safe and sound, I gie him a bosey, grateful that he came home this time. But I keen at them that he gings out for willna consider as sacrifices while they're tucking into their fish suppers. Yep. The next thing. So I had a couple of kind of Pride themed ones because it's June, it's Pride month. The second ever Shetland Pride is being held on the 1st of July. I'm actually going to win home for it this year. I couldn't go home for it last year because I had a prior engagement, but I'm hoping to get home for this year's one. I'm very excited. But this is one of the Pride themed poems that I wrote in dialect. It's called The Worset Rainbow. Worset means wool. As the years ging by and we opened our minds, it'll a' get better in this days. We can live as ourselves an authentic life while we aren't judged or made to hiddle awa, while we can ging a walk down Commercial Street on a day shopping in Lerwick hand in hands and errands. Here's to the eens that came afore us, them that blazed our trails and found what was waiting at the end of the Worset Rainbow. There'll come a day afore lang when we can all march together as one big loving front, and we dinna hae to worry what other folk might think about the speculation that could come with it. or even if you think about Wichita. I'm going to finish with this one. So I've been taking part every April since 2020 in National Poetry Writing Month, or NaPoWriMo, which I first took up in lockdown, kind of thinking it's a good way to pass the time, as we took up lots of ways to pass the time. I wrote that this is the very first poem I ever wrote for NaPoWriMo, and the sentiment was kind of related to the fact that I was hoping we'd get you to kind of get you locked in soon. That sentiment apes like a bucket of prawns in the sun in the long run. But this one, it's kind of like, well, it's called Summer Dim, and it's about the Summer Dim in Shetland, which is usually only about this time of year, actually. I think it's just been. But yeah, I guess it's also an idea that like, brighter days are coming, and there's a few folk I can really enjoy it and find it quite comforting. So I'm going to finish with this one. It's called Summer Dim. Eens we're out of the darkness, we'll watch the summer dim together. There'll be nae night, nae stars to count, and nothing to worry about. Just whist, the silence, and a sun that winna set for the time being. The horizon burning orange and the cool air blawing as we enjoy the purples, pinks, and yellows, fanning out the windward heats like a celestial pea cocktail. We'll drink in the night as the sun comes up, then mak our way home with the dawn's light, gliding more togetherness in the June days. Thank you very much. If you'd like to read any more of my stuff or follow any of my usual social media links, I'm going to drop my link tree in the chat there, and you can catch up with me on yonder. I do also have a Substack. I'm trying to get into the way of writing a newsletter because I'm just on the advice of my mentor for my New Writers Award. So yeah, I'll just do that now. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of the night.
Okay, excellent. Very good.
Thank you very much for that. That was excellent. And you will be headlining. Where is it? Is it Carla's?
Carla Woodburn. It's Express Yourself. It's card. It's at Brew on Dumbarton Road in Glasgow. It's kind of like the Broom Hill kind of end. Right. I used to live not far from there actually, but yeah. So that's next Thursday night at 7. She's given me the featured poet slot, so I'll be there reading 3 more poems and apparently answering questions too. So
excellent. Okay, so
ask me, please.
Right. Okay, so check Hannah out there. I love the way your stuff to me just sounds. It's very conversational, and I like that. And what did you say? A bucket of prawns in the sun.
That's kind of well. It was actually one of my old lecturers at Strathclyde. I did history in first year at Strathclyde. I nearly took it instead of English as my degree, like with journalism and creative writing. But there was a lecturer called Richard, or maybe we should drop his name actually. No, sorry, Richard Finlay. He's a Will Kent academic, and he was in first year, and we loved him. He was very entertaining, but also very good at what he did. It was British history we were doing in first year, and he was very same way, quite conversational. But at the end of the lectures, he used to say things like, "Has anybody got any questions?" No, right, then I'll be off quick in the bucket of prawns in the sun. See you next week. And I just thought, so yeah. But for me, it's like the idea is that if something that is aged badly, like a saying or a particular thing, you can just say, "This aged like a bucket of prawns in the sun," which means it aged badly. But I'm quite proud of that phrase. Fox and think it's quite funny. So
I think
I've furlined that for him. But...
Hannah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I'm now going to introduce Linda Jackson, a colleague and a dear friend, and she's now going to take over for a little bit. Linda.
Hello, everybody, and it's lovely to be back. We missed a little bit, a month out this time, so it's nice to be back. You can see I'm sweating like a pit pony or a prawn going off in the sun or whatever it was. I find this a bit mental, this weather. I'm a white, light green, Irish descent, freckly person, so I kind of hide a wee bit. But anyway, I'm so happy to have these people. I was going to call it the lights of the north, and then I thought about Bobby, and I thought, well, he's never out the Highlands and places like that anyway. So we could say that we've got our lovely northern lights, SCAP on Zoom. So Bobby Motherwell, who's going to be our next reader, is a singer-songwriter, fabulous singer-songwriter and a poet from Glasgow. And he lives in Howwood, and he's got Howwood going great guns now in terms of venues. Tom Robinson is playing there, you know, it's not small change. But above and beyond that, for me, Adam Holmes is there tomorrow night. And if you don't know it, I think there might be a couple of tickets left. I go up to the the Hebridean Fest, the Celt Fest. And I think I saw Adam Holmes when he was about 18 before he even had joined the bigger band that he was in. A 16-year-old or whatever, he was phenomenal voice. It's just the voice coming from the heart out, you know. And there was Bobby Motherwell with him in Howard in the boarding house. So I'll be there tomorrow night. I'm very happy. So Bobby did a lot of promotion work. He's a brilliant musician in his own. And he would say, I think, that his work is based on his love of the outdoors. I've just watched White YouTube video of the island of Egg, which is a great heart space for myself as well. So it was just lovely to revisit the Singing Sands and see everything there. So his solo music project is Suliday. He can correct me when he comes on if that's not how to say it, Suliday. And I love the name of his album. It's called Kitchen Sink Dharma. And I think that whole Dharma thing, you'll hear it when he reads his work, where he's going with that. But yeah, it was the BBC's album of the week. And he describes his first book, Lots of Things, is about poetry, prose, and photography. And had his work published. His poetry's been published in Dreich and Stanzas Mapping Scotland. He also has recently become the poet in residence in one of my kind of favourite haunts. Remember Brian Whittingham was writer in residence, a great friend of all of us, who's sadly not with us anymore. And coming from Paisley as a wee girl, I was a school dogger, it's not surprisingly, and I used to dog school and go down to Lochwinnoch, and then so loved it many years later when I took my kids to the Royal Society Bird Sanctuary, RSPB, and Protection of Birds. And actually that's where Bobby now has just landed his job as a writer in residence. So we'll be sailing you down there, Bobby, with our poets. We'll be down to spy out the wee creatures with the binoculars. Meanwhile, we're going to be watching and listening to this lovely guy who does such a lot for music and is a great musician and poet himself. Please welcome Bobby Motherwell.
Thanks very much for that, Linda. That's a really lovely introduction, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I've only just started as the poet in residence at the RSPB at Lochwinnoch, and it's a place I've lived in Howard for about 30 years now, and the RSPB at Lochwinnoch's been a real. It's a place I go to on a weekly basis, and it's great to be able to develop a lot of my ideas in a bit more detail, and my photography as well. But what I'm going to speak about tonight, there are 3 poems that I've written that are linked by the island of Egg, which became my second favourite island about 2 or 3 years ago when I visited it for the first time, and I've just never stopped going back. I've been there. I tend to go about 4 or 5 times a year, and I just found it's a great place to go, and it allows me to write music. And most of the songs that are on my album, Kitchen Sink Dharma, were created in Egg, or had some features of Egg. And the very first poem that I'm going to read, there's 2 pieces of spoken word on my album. The very first one I'm going to read is a poem called How Peace Was Won, and it was basically a discussion we had with some of I'd 4 of my pals over. We were having a nice session in Egg, and we were kind of discussing what the difference between peace, contentment, and happiness, and what it actually was. And this is where this poem came from. This is called How Peace Was Won. Peace is a hard-fought state, a contradiction in perpetual flux, no easy hill to be conquered, and a brooding force to be settled. Mind you, so is contentment. Bombarded with trinkets and time-saving gadgets, we invite them to own us as they own our neighbour. And time is neither banked nor treasured, lost to envy and sold for gold. In old black and white, a kitchen sink dharma, where he who doesn't want can't suffer, and scorned succour for a furious war and worry. Some things in your control, and most not, and that's your lot. Aye, peace is a hard-fought state, right enough, when we let craving invade our tumbling thoughts for examination. This parade, the time of day we give them, outweighing their status. Our first step is recognition, the second, rejection, turning slavery to emancipation, so that the independent heart might find it and a second age can emerge, falling upwards from the soil to the sea and the skies. So let me rise like an eagle, high over pride and precipice, and shy as a solitary otter, skipping over the singing sands to the clear blue water and swim. Let me be the old man with the old red van who sits in his lag beach lawn, delivering pearls to his young son and wife as his grandchildren punctuate his life. All exclamation and no question. Mark his territory, hoist his flag on no man's land, a shared dominion where peace was won. So that has a wonderful accompaniment on the album by a very talented pianist called Andy Lucas. So there is a soundscape behind it. The next two poems are, as I said before, are linked to egg. And the next one relates to an Aryan egg called the Grulin. And the history of the Grulin, I mean, the history of eggs is a phenomenal history. I'm sure a lot of you know about it, not just the social history, but the kind of ancient history and the geological history there is fabulous. But the Grulin was a community settlement that was basically disbanded in 1853. 14 families were cleared from the area, and it then became a settlement for a solitary sheep farmer. And this is called, you may be able to, my Gaelic isn't particularly good, and somebody can tell me if I've got this right or not. I've been told by Finlay Napier this is the correct way to pronounce it, so it's Finlay's fault if I don't get this right. It's called Topa Nam Banova, and it means the well of the wise woman. I sat with the ghosts of Grulin, beneath Anne's skurs sheltering pitch stone columns, proud faces set solemnly in rock, mourning a lost humanity from this deserted shoulder. One by one they arrive, barefooted on lush grass cleared for sheep grazing. The lament of the solitary Grulin piper resonates from the conscience of the reticent scapegoat shepherd. The laird's lackey decants all extents and contents of inclined basalt black house walls, of mother and daughter, father and son, for a solitary shelter to his shame. A wind-trailed violent silence falls. The massacre cave empathetically resonates, where Odysseus receives Hades' haunted guests. Spirits lay transparent hands on my knees. I weep their tears into the well of the holy woman, where flag iris and watercress tumble a blanket of serenity downhill and across to muck. White horses crash tormented souls against the rocks of hope for all humanity. Too late for this community. Strewn like volcanic silt, scattered now to Nova Scotian horizons, an offspring of common unity, from which this island's heart was born. And the final one of the three, I spend a lot of time on egg with my dog, and if you there's a video for the very first poem I read there from my album, How Peace Was Won, that you can watch on YouTube, and it maybe gives a wee bit of context for this particular poem, which is basically just about me arriving and leaving egg, and what it's like to arrive on the island, and what it's like to leave, and how I feel. This is called Wild Garlic and Bluebell Way. Uphill to the Red Boffin, carrying more than my rucksack and flight case, firm deep outliers outlining the rutted road, anticipation of footfall and grateful ground. I follow his lead. He sniffs the air, hobbles over cobbles and three, and me, I inhale, just to breathe, along the Wild Garlic and Bluebell Way. And each day along the Wild Garlic and Bluebell Way, we commute with consummate disarray, freeing knots of doubt that they might stray, and unravel to strands of silk on undulating currents of gentle unwind. Connecting each bright prayer flag in line, we unpick the thought from the thinking, the elixir there for the drinking. for those with a thirst. And downhill now from the Red Boffin, rucksack intact, flight case now lighter, notes randomly released. The road softened, our load easy, we float. And Chaffinch and Wren every now and again attentively monitor our progress as our ship in the distance docks. And he looks at me, and I at he. And of our short stay we finally take leave, having surrendered to believe, to cast knotted arteries away along the wild garlic and bluebell way.
Wow. Well, as I say, for somebody who's a real, maybe the first time I went to Egwood, maybe about 25 years ago, and when you described that arriving, there was something, you know, at that time they just opened up the wee shop at the pier, and the person I was with was good friends of Wes and Mags and all that. They'd started the community of Egg. So I was right in the middle of all that, you know, so just when you're reading all of that, I could just, and I think it was wonderful that you went back. I've written a wee bit about the Masker Cave as well. And from that, you know, that community heart you talked about, the island's heart, that struggle then, and the struggle to get rid of the German landlord 27 years ago, whatever it was now. There's been continuous growth since then, you know, a real strong sense of community. And I think you perfectly delivered that. I absolutely loved the work you did. I mean, I'm a fan of the island, and I know it when I can, you know, you could actually see the things that you're talking about if you know the island. Those of you who haven't been, you must go. You must go. And I think there's a horrible feeling when the boat's there ready to take you away again. It's not nice. It doesn't feel great, you know, but you know, you couldn't live there probably. I don't think I could, but I've spent most wonderful times, just because there's if you've got any kind of community thoughts or socialist, shall we say, leanings that are still dormant and hopeful, you feel them alive in Egg when you meet people. But the poetry, the readings you did, and I would advise everyone to watch that video of the wee dog running about. That wee dog looked unwell. Has he got a wee sore leg?
No, he's got 3 legs, Linda.
Oh,
and that's part of the last poem when he hobbles and cobbles in 3.
Hobbles and cobbles.
Is
there something wrong with that dog? Not much. He's got 3 legs. All right.
3 legs.
Sorry, I missed that. But I was looking at him. I just loved it. That this in Lag Beach as well. That bit where you say that you wanted to see the guy with the red van, and how he putting that against the whole idea of occupation and territorial appropriation, you know, when you just say, let's mark his territory, grandchildren, that line where you said, no questions, you know, just the way young kids arrive, they're just a riot right in the middle of everything, but he doesn't, he just, you know, all that. And there seemed to be, there was a line, I was trying to put my head on it, the James Kelman story it's from. He said some things are in your control and some are not. You might not know it, but that's a line straight out of a James Kelman a short story about dispossession, and you know, what you can attain and what you can hold on to. I'll send you.
I'd like to see that, Linda. I wasn't aware of that. There are references in that particular poem to Richard Rohr's books, Falling Upwards, which and also to Soil and Soul. And that,
that's something else. That's something else as well. But yeah, the thing I loved as well about what you were saying was that about the independent heart, and yeah, fantastic. And of course, Egg is all about, you know, the score and everybody waiting to see the eagles and all that. Yeah, the grueling, I think you really marked it out. I'm one just now, which is based one part of the well of the wise women. Well, I told you I was doing that, and I'll send you bits of it. But whatever you. And I think when you go there on the video, you'll definitely find a way this summer to get to Egg, I would hope. And watch out for Bobby's album, which I think that title's incredible as well. The Kitchen Sink Dharma, from listening to some of that work. So thank you so much for reading for us tonight. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Linda.
Thank you very much. Well, that was wonderful. That was just wonderful. I was just loving we're going places here. Hannah had just with that lovely voice. It was all over the hills up there and the Shetlandic tones. And then we've just been in Egg. And now I'm going to bring back Donna, who is from Clydebank. And we're going to be Clydebanked with Donna, just to ground us again. And Donna's going to introduce Judy Taylor.
Thanks very much, Linda. Bobby, that was amazing. There was one line in your point, and it was to unpick the thought from the thinking. And that was just like, wow, yeah. And I'll be actually thinking about that tonight, because that's quite, Have you put down in the chat the name of your album and your video, the link to your video?
I haven't, but I'll do that before the night's out.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
great. Yeah.
I've never been to Egg, and I've never been to Shetland or Orkney and that, but I think it sounds like a goer this summer, definitely. So, the next poet that I'm going to introduce is Judith Taylor. And again, I think the first time I saw Judith was up in Stonehaven, and then saw Judith again in Sligo Festival. And there's quite a few. It's like there's that sense of community in amongst the poets, which is lovely. And again, Judith's work is absolutely excellent. And I feel there's a bit of a quietness to it, but it's Judith's bio. So Judith Taylor comes from Perthshire and now lives and works in Aberdeen, where she is one of the organisers of the monthly Poetry at Books and Beans events. Her poetry has appeared widely in magazines and anthologies. First full-length collection, Not in Nightingale County, was published in 2017 by Red Squirrel Press. And her second, Across Your Careful Garden, is East Literature and Art magazine, Pushing Out the Boat, and is one of the editors of Poetry Scotland. Welcome, Judith Taylor.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. I am going to be reading from the new collection, Across Your Careful Garden, a wee plug, available from Red Squirrel Press now. And there are some sample poems on my website. I'll put a link to those in the chat once I've finished reading. This collection was originally, excuse me, planned to be around music and performance, but various spanners got thrown in the works of that, notably the pandemic. So I'm kind of picking out some of the music strand that survived reading tonight, you know, in keeping with what SCAP's all about, because it's more than just spoken word. But because I'm just back from Orkney and have spent a week looking at chambered tombs, basically, I'm going to start with this kind of slightly archaeology geek poem, which has been on my mind this week. It's called Grave Goods. It's pretty much the oldest human habit we still know about, behaving as if the dead are going somewhere where they'll need what we can give them. A bed of shells, a hunting spear, a mirror, a toy, food, of course, for the journey. And for the rich, a whole dinner service, luxury weapons, transportation, servants. You can't take it with you, we say, but what we do betrays how we think of them, the ones we knew, as continuing, pain, age, fragility wiped away, but still themselves. And if they're going on, there should be something they're going into. Perhaps we'll help them on their way. We want to help them. We want to think they can sense we don't forget them through these artifacts. And we know how he despised these comforting illusions. Still, we choose our father's clothes for the crematorium with great care. Pick out a tie and press it, and send him on that journey with a golf tee in his pocket. So this is one of the kind of, well, it's about music and performance, and it isn't. It's a lockdown poem. It's called His Majesty's. His Majesty's Theatre, if you don't know it, is the big theatre in the centre of Aberdeen. His Majesty in concern was Edward VII, I think. It had its centenary not that long ago. And it's very well haunted for such a comparatively new building. It's got a ghost stagehand who acts as a poltergeist and messes things up behind the scenes. And there's a ghost barmaid called Miss Mitchell, who may also be the Grey Lady or may not be. So at least 2, possibly 3 ghosts. So this is a poem about them and her in lockdown. A dark theatre, a house full of absence. Dust on the heavy cold lights, and the painted curtains still proclaiming companies who have closed their doors. The ice creams past their sell-by dates in the freezers, and the seats shut like barnacles when the tide has bubbled away, for all they know, for good. You could walk the back of house and be all that's stirring in the disorienting corridors. Not an exit light to guide you to the locked, posterless doors. Everything idle as the passageways the builders left the pyramids by when the lamps were doused and the ceremonies over. Out front, there's only the Grey Lady, baffled at the loneliness she meant to evade by lingering in the foyer and the stalls bar. Look over as you pass on the almost empty street, and maybe you'll see her standing staring out at you, her pale face lighting the painted glass beside the doors, as she wonders what's become of the world she loved, if she's even real anymore, if you are. Of course, all music making and so forth is not about public performance, and this is one about kind of music in an informal context. Because I can't sing, I miss out on a lot of that. My great curse is I remember all the words, and I'm the proverbial person who couldn't hold a tune in a bucket. So this is kind of about that. It's about a song called The Parting Glass, which you might know. It's a song about alcohol and regret, so both Scotland and Ireland claim it, but I think it's Ireland's really. So the poem is called The Glass. Not midnight yet. My parents had gone to bed and left me sitting up on the sofa, drinking the sideboard whiskey, watching the clock tick, and thinking again how things reversed themselves since the days it would have been me in bed by this time, lying awake, listening out for clues to how much drink had been taken and what the trouble was. Till it all died down, the end of another day, old house ready for sleep. How clear I thought my mind was when I looked at them. And part of me thinks so still, wonders exasperated where I picked up that song, The Parting Glass, that I can't stop hearing inside my head tonight. That same old drunk at the end of its story. All the harm I've done, alas, 'twas only done to me. Yeah, nice for you that you can think so. And part of me wants to ask, how could I say that? Did I not see how I belonged? And that's the part of me that wishes still, as I used to wish on Hogmanay, for a good voice, to sing and to be sung with, to let the tears all fall ready for sleep, to sing good night, to sing joy be with you all. And just a wee one to finish. The music performance did eventually come back, and although this poem was actually written before lockdown, I think of it as a kind of post-lockdown poem, because one of the first things I heard in concert afterwards was Mozart's clarinet concerto, and the clarinet is just one of my loves. I can't play it. I was in a brass band at school very badly, but the clarinet is a bit of a thing of mine. So this is a poem about that. It's just called Clarinet. She's a voice, they say, but when did you hear a human voice sing such grace in Baroque quintets and ragtime bands alike, lilt through the ornaments and lament with so much reason, glow like a low star, then slide on up and scatter notes far and wide, a firework under the blackwood skies of the jazz age. This is the world as sung to you by a long-serving, sensible, weary angel, compassionate after all she's seen, but not deceived. Her saddest song has a whisper deep inside of translunary laughter. The sorrows of all the people of all the world shadow the phrases she makes dance. And with such sweet tears, you realize when it's too late, she sings that same old song again for you, distingué lovers, so newly met in the garden. Thank you.
Judith, thank you very much for that. I think I said to you before, you probably won't remember, I think it was up in Pitsligo, that I could just listen to you doing your poetry for me to go to sleep to, like just your voice and just the rhythm of it, absolutely beautiful. And your poem about the grave, like the goods for the grave, and how we get dressed up in our Sunday best, like, and that whole idea of taking things with us. And it's like, maybe that's like, we still can't accept that death, that we die. It's like we have to go on. I thought that was really interesting. And that about the lamps doused and the ceremony's over. And again, that's that kind of finality, going with the poem about death. And yeah, it was just as well, could relate to the when you were saying about listening for the clues after drinking. I can relate to that very much. Yeah, like a silent house, or a house that's everybody's quite happy. Yep. So Judith, thank you very much for that, and I hope to see you again at Stonehaven or New Pitsligo. You're going to be there.
Yeah, I'm going to be at both of those, so I'll see you there.
Right, okay, right, see you there then. And Judith, can you put your two books on a link to the two books on the the chat? Thank you very much, Judith. Thank you. So now I'm going to hand back to the mighty Linda Jackson, and she's going to be introducing our guest poet for tonight. Take it away, Linda.
I love the mighty Linda Jackson. I'm really dead, and you know it, missus. But anyway, crawling through the world at the moment, shattered. But anyway, oh Judith, I just love these poems, and I just, when you were saying there about the end, you know, obviously everybody knows I've written the cabinet book with my mum, and that wee golf tee in his pocket. I was just, oh, that was, but also the grey lady, when you talked about the grey lady who's baffled by the, you know, obviously like we all were baffled, but you put that bafflement into a ghost, you know, that she's baffled by the loneliness that she tried to evade by becoming a ghost in a theatre where she could have people all the time. And that was just wonderful. I really loved that. So much really nice things there, and the music, turning the clarinet music into an angel's song, the sorrow of all in the world. I have to have that book. I have to have that book. Thank you so much. So we have come, as Donna was saying there, our special guest. I don't know what's happening with the two male poets today, but I've been running about when I was saying about going to Egg all the time. One of the reasons I kind of started thinking about Egg at the beginning was to see if I could swim to St Kilda. And I thought, well, that would be mad. But 3 times, Donald, I've tried to get to St Kilda and been vomiting on the Minch and had to just give up. I had friends take me. Eventually, my boyfriend of mine was going to get me a Chinook helicopter for somebody in the Air Force to fly me there because I was so desperate. I still haven't been. But anyway, this man, I'm sure has, and has got lots to say about it in his fabulous Gannett's, the Guga Hunters, the Guga Stone books. So yes, we are very, very fortunate tonight to have Donald S. Murray with us. He's from Ness in Lewis originally, and he's now a teacher living in Shetland. His, I think, quite infamous books now, Berlin's Guga Hunters, and then Lewis Press did the Guga Stone. I mean, I can let him tell you about that, but it's a really, it's wonderful. For the Thingwell Ball, what was that? What was the book you did for historic environment, Donald?
Oh, that's for the safety of all.
For the safety of all, yeah,
That's
the
the one
safety of all.
Yeah.
And I can't say it, your Gaelic plays it. It's Sequamore.
Well, yeah, but that's a Latin name. How you Gaelic? I should need to. That's that Shepherd's Nicholson slogan was the second or let us follow was actually their motto, the school motto. There's no Q's in Gaelic, you know.
Okay, well, see, I've no clue about Gaelic. I don't have a baldy clue about Gaelic. I just love to listen to it and think, oh, that sounds so sweet. I've no idea. Your first novel, As Women Lay Dreaming, with Sarah Band, won the Paul Tordy Award, and the poetry Akanalt, where is it Akanalt? Where's the emphasis? How do you say that?
Akanalt. Yeah.
Akanalt. And that was illustrated by Paul Bride and won the Callum MacDonald Memorial Prize. His new book, Red Star in the over the Hebridean, is it out now? Is it coming out?
Well, it's not quite out, and I didn't bring it with me yet because I thought we were going to talk about lighthouses. Yeah, tonight. So that was.
Talk about whatever you want to. The lighthouses were wonderful, but that's a collection of poems and stories that I think it's to come out very soon.
23rd of June. On the 20, I think it's the 23rd of June, if I remember rightly.
Well,
but I have got the copies. I just left them in the sitting room. I never thought.
Tonight's definitely a buyer's night for me. I mean, good for all of them now, I think. But yeah, even the title, I love Red Star Over the Hebrides, and yeah, I can't wait to see that. So that's a mixture of poems and stories. From is that Tapcoot Press? Tapcoot Press.
Yes, Taproot Press have been very, very good, in publishing it. So
another very northern star from my favourite part of the world, and we're very fortunate to have and hear this lovely voice. This is Donald S. Murray.
It's a real pleasure to be there. If, by the way, I look blurred at any point, it's not the effect of alcohol or anything. There's a couple of flies wandering here. And occasionally I've noticed that going across the screen. So I'll flap them off if they appear. I apologize right away. So I'm not going to start off. I mean, I think we discussed talking about lighthouses. And as I say, I wrote an awful lot of poems about lighthouses. This was one of my, this was published by Catalonia a long while back. And now somebody's asked me to, if they can republish the book, and it's called Between Minch and Motherwell. So part of it is about Shetland, part of it is about the Hebrides. So I'm going to start off by speaking in a very strong Lewis accent, and this one is called Lewis Seaman in Germany in the 60s. So I'm going to ham it up slightly, all right? So I apologize in advance for that. When I was still a deckhand, I stepped into this Hamburg pub to be deafened by the hubbub from these 5 coves in a band. And so I says to this one, John, or was it Stuart or Paul, you're not a patch on Mud O'Don, and the way his fingers skip up and down accordion keys, when he plays the military two-step at the dance in Shawburst Hall. And until you put on a decent show and learn to play some proper songs, you guys would be best to go and work out where you've got it wrong. Leave now, I say. Just get back to where you first belonged. And that's how the whole thing started. The Fab Four, Sergeant Pepper, Let It Be. The world owes it all to Manchester, and it all came from me. So that's my poem about the origin of the Beatles and how that was created by by Lewis people many years ago, who went into a Hamburg pub. So the reason that came to mind is that actually the request came through today. This guy wants to republish it. This is part of my For the Safety of All, but I'm going to read out principally poems, most of which I haven't published yet, and it's about lighthouses, because my whole life in a way has been inspired by lighthouses. When I was growing up, the Butterlewis Lighthouse, which is known in Gaelic as I've just forgotten, Rohanish, which is a triple tautology. It is Rua is Gaelic, Rua is Pictish, and Nish is Norse, and it means headland, headland, headland. So if you want to translate it, that's the actual name. But this is exile, and as I say, so that was me. It kind of inspired by that. It was the furthest inland that he'd ever been, and he missed the presence of the lighthouse beam that had always drummed before him like a pulse, more persistent than the tide. That stink of bladder wrack and dulse stacked upon the shoreline near his home. Without the radiance of that tower, he often felt alone and longing for the cleaving of the wind, the cliff top on which that structure stood, where as a child he'd stop and tap out imitations of the rhythms of its light, flashing white every 5 seconds into immeasurable night. Now, as I say, when I grew up, the light even shone at the house, so we saw that. So I'll just very quickly go on, and I'm going to read this from my iPad rather than anything else. So this is the Butterlewis Lighthouse. And the legend has it that the Norwegians tried to drag it, the Norse, when the Vikings, when they invaded Lewis, tried to drag it all the way to the coast of Norway, the Butterlewis and the whole of the Western Isles. And you'll find out, it's a legend actually in the Faroes too, that the Vikings tried to do that, exactly the same thing there. So I'll leave you in suspense about how this led to the creation of the Western Isles. Butterlewis, long ships looped rope through that eye. Waves had drilled in Luasian gneiss and tried to drag the island past inlets and headlands, the still mass of the mainland, its people looking on askance as Moor and Macher shifted stance with Callanish unearthed and uprooted, Oogs, hills torn from foundations, responding to the tug and stern, seafarers' strong arms, whose grip began to fumble when alarm boomed and hollered from the south, with warnings passed from mouth to trembling mouth, that sand and stone were starting to resist their efforts. New islands, Barra, Vatersay, Uist, began a fresh existence, breaking from the whole till even Harris almost slipped from the hold of Norsemen, determined after years abroad to take rock home, a souvenir of time spent south. The grip grew loose and hopeless, untied the noose, concluding that despite their strain, Ireland could not shift and would have to remain firmly in that wild, wet space their old gods had determined they were placed. So a lot of ones that I wrote were about that. I was quite fascinated by lighthouses when I went round the country, and I went to places like Arbroath and you know, where the Bell Rock stands, and suddenly realised that they always talk about the declaration of Arbroath, but in fact, the Bell Tower was the first offshore lighthouse built anywhere in this country. And I thought that in itself is a declaration. It's a different type of declaration. So that's what I called it, a different declaration. In the hours following dawn, those employed in signal tower used to turn binoculars on Bell Rock simply to ensure the copper ball above the lamp was lifted to signal all was well to shore. A declaration to Arbroath that no matter what storms unsettled salt, those afloat were held secure by the persistent pattern of its light, that in these mists, which often draped around that coast, a horn would sound, allowing those at sea to note the proximity of danger, warning residents and guests, the passing stranger, of har and tempest close to eye or hand. Now perhaps we need a similar tower, enabling us to foresee and withstand the turbulence and cloud ushered close by those who rule us each day on this neighbouring lands. So that was, I've got a whole pile of them, but I'll skip reading them, and I'll go and read just a wee bit. You did mention the Guga Stone. Now, as I say, as a child, I used to eat Guga. Guga, of course, is gannet. That was in the chicks of gannet that we found on Soldiska. And in a way, it became what people ate in my part of the world, partly because the seas were so dangerous out there. I know we've got Hannah here, who's a Shetlander. Shetland in a way is quite fortunate in its naval, in the seas that surround it, in that there are deep voes, in that too, for instance, the water in the Minch was very, very shallow, whereas the water in the Atlantic is very, very deep. So it's like taking a pint glass and trying to pinch it, pour all of it into a whiskey glass. And so the reason that the people from Ness used to depend upon seabirds was it's actually easier to eat seabirds. There wasn't the chance of drowning as there had been so many times off the coast of Lewis. There's also no natural harbour on the whole, apart from, well, there's one, Carloway and Bernera, in the whole west coast of the Hebrides. That's the only natural harbour. So I'll read. You mentioned St Kilda, and I have been in St Kilda, Linda, and I spent a week there on St Kilda, and I did get a helicopter there, to be honest. And I have to say, it was one of the sunniest weeks that St Kilda has ever had, humid. But I'll read about lovemaking in St Kilda. Would that be all right? And that's part of my Guga Stone. I hope that won't be. And then I'll read two. One about lovemaking in St Kilda, and another about something. Well, I'll tell you about that later on. When a man makes love to a St. Kildan woman, her moans and sighs are like the cries of birds, a cooing and screaming that seems scarcely human, but has been fashioned never to disturb those who might mistake the sound their passion makes for flocks circling village bay at night, scanning skies for wings. When morning breaks, they wake unaware another soaring flight has taken place in Main Street's walls, where a man and woman coupled to break free from an island's bonds and strictures, all that conspired to tie them down. Gravity was shed along with trousers, skirt and shawl as they touched the heights that birds can reach with their bodies' power and beauty, rise and fall, arms changed to wings by the tumultuous air they breathe. Sorry, that was the fly coming across there, just in this. I can see it up there on the screen. Okay, so this is a St. Kildan woman writes a love song to her new husband. When I first heard you were to be mine, my heart trembled like a wren within a wall, hoping your fingers would be soft as down and not rough as touch of quills and wingtips, trusting too that as we bedded down on fulmer feathers, you would not possess the gannet's savage thrust, but instead the slow and easy rhythm of a cormorant diving for bright and gleaming fish. So, will that be enough just now?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, that was incredible. Very, very sensual at the end there, Donald. You're a true Highlander. That was lovely. I think as well, I thought when you were doing the man and women coupling, I remember when I was sort of aspiring to go to St. Kilda, one of the things was the fulmars, you know, the tradition of the men having to climb up. So when you were talking about that, you know, I thought maybe one of the crazy things, isn't it? Lots of them lost their life because they have to show that they can get the eggs for the woman and they'll be able to feed her,
I mean, I don't think that was actually true. I think that's one of these legends that is, you know, told. There's a lot of stories about St. Kildan. You have to say, I have my doubts about it. And I don't think there's any written record that they used to have to go on kind of game, you know, in a sense, rehearsal dives. I think that's a kind of mainland legend that's been imposed upon on St. Kilda. And there's a lot of them. There's a fair number of them. You know, there's people all. I mean, in some ways, St. Kilda was not the most remote of the Hebrides. You know, places like Mingley, you know, was in geographical terms, was just as you know, just as remote, but also in a sense, you know, St. Kilda always had visitors from, you know, the 19th century on. There were other parishes and other districts which didn't have the same number. But it is such a glamorous, you know, it's a fantastic place to go to. It's one of the most, you know, outstanding pieces of landscape.
Well, I would go for no other reason to see if someone can make love and give me wings from what you were saying. Then you just fly. Jeez, oh, I'm for the helicopter.
Red Bull will do that for you.
I'm off. I was going to see about these people that ran away. I've now got different reasons to get on the helicopter. But yeah, I loved also, I remember going to the island, going away up to the Ness myself and just walking up. And I thought that was beautiful the way you described the wee boy tapping out the light. You could just imagine him doing that. And last year I was over in Barga and met some lovely people. And one of the women, I spent a lot of time there just walking up the river and chatting to her. She had lived there all her life. And the Barga bells go on every 15 minutes through the night, you know, I was demented actually by it, but she just said when she goes away, like you were talking when you went inland, you were just looking for that beam. Everything seemed so dark without that regularity, and that beam of light was beautiful. And she said the same when she went away from Barga. She couldn't sleep for waiting in the bells every 15 minutes through the night. She just, it's what she knew, you know. But
it's amazing. I mean, sometimes I remember the lighthouse in the context of international events that took place. I always remember the day that Bobby Kent was killed, and I was a very young child. It was a thick fog that day. You couldn't have got a thicker fog. In fact, the school bus couldn't drive down the road to get us. And, you could feel the depression of that.
It's a wee bit of pathetic fallacy.
And you hear the foghorn, of course, blowing in the background.
I think sympathising with the upsets across the border there.
Border, yes, yeah, exactly.
And I also loved the work you did when you talked about the Vikings trying to take the way the islands, all the different parts resisted the pull and held on to their earth. I just loved the way you described that, you know, that personification of them holding and digging in and resisting the men pulling at them. But it's a fabulous idea. It just shows you can just look at some of these myths and it's such a lovely territory for writers, isn't it? Really?
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, there's so many myths that you heard when you were growing up, and so many stories. And would
you say that your life in an island place like that? I mean, obviously there's the light coming down, and that beam being part of your everyday. Would you say where your environment, there was more stories and myths that would be told to children?
I think. I came from a small village called South Dell in Ness, and the district of Ness. It's amazing how many writers there were in it. Astonishing number of writers, both in Gaelic and English, and I think that certainly helped. I mean, there was a guy. Ulster Campbell, there is a guy, Ulster Campbell, who's worked in Berlin, which is to me. There was another one, his brother Norman, who his work has been translated into the Czech language from Gaelic. It's quite remarkable how many storytellers and writers we had in that tiny village, 63 houses. Just, and that's going back generations. A lot of the Gaelic songs are written by people from my village.
That's wonderful, and you wonder then, because then it'll grow from that. You think, well, where did it come from? If it was an old woman singing the border ballads to her kids, or whatever, where did that originate? But then, of course, the fact of it increases the likelihood that people round about will get involved with that, because that's what that village does. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Writers.
Yeah, I think even I don't know if Hannah was taught by, there was a guy, Donna Campbell, who was the same family. He was that was 8 or 2, but he was the head of English and Anderson High here in Shetland. And it was astonishing. They were very good to me. They used to give me books to read. They would say, "Hey, Donald, have you looked at that one? Have you looked at that?" And I think in a way that was a fantastic inspiration to me.
So what's your next thing? I know you've got a book coming out in June. Writers are always looking ahead. What is your next?
Well, I've got another novel coming out. Number of things have come together. And in fact, I think Judith talked about, we actually used the parting glass in this musical, and pure coincidence. We're doing this, we're involved in this musical, and we've been in Eden Court. I think we're going to Celtic Connections, and we're going to other events later on, but it's about the leaving of the Metagama, which is a ship. There's the fly again. It's a ship which there were 1,500 people left the Western Isles in 1920. Sorry, 1924. 2 years. And there was a ship called the Metagama that took over 800. That was the one that led it. So we had a musical based upon that. So that entire musical based on that, and we've been doing that. But I also wrote, I've just finished more or less writing a novel, which is about the experiences of people who went to Detroit and Chicago and Toronto, you know, in the time of exile, because we got an awful lot. We spent 3 weeks there, but we got an awful lot of stories about, you know, Lewisman and Uist, people from Uist and, you know, Barra and places like that. Exile in the States and Canada. So that's my novel, and it's kind of about how people moved from an agricultural, monocultural area to an industrial, multicultural area, and how difficult that, you know, how some of them adjusted to it, but others did not.
It's quite difficult if you're looking at all these stories. If it's a novel, you could imagine a collection of stories. So how do you select who you're going to make the main? How do you decide out of all those stories who's going to?
Who are the main character? In a sense, well, there are made up, but it also helps by having you have a village gossip as one of the other guy who comes with all the stories about what's happening. You know, to other people. I mean, I heard stories when I was growing up. My next door neighbour, you know, who I grew up alongside, had spent years in Ontario. And I remember one day complaining about the snow when I came. It's really cold, it's really snowing. I said, you don't know the half of it. He started talking about that. So there was that. So that's the next novel. And in some ways, it's a continuation of As the Woman Lay Dreaming, because clearly what motivated an awful lot of these people to leave, you know, parts of particularly Lewis and Harris, was the trauma of the First World War, where more Lewis and Harris people were killed per head of population in the First World War than any other part of the United Kingdom, you know, percentage-wise. One of the things I would criticise, for instance, the teaching of Scottish history in school is they focus an awful lot on trench warfare. Now, you know, Lewis and Harris people and Islanders generally were not really involved in trench warfare. They were involved in naval warfare. They were involved in things like Gallipoli, you know, the Dardan, well, what they used to call the Dardanelles when I was growing up, but it's Gallipoli they call it now. So that plus, you know, 208 men being killed literally within, you know, a couple of 100 meters of their own home, you know, that had a huge knock-on effect on the population of the Western Irish generally, but most especially Lewis and Harris. So that was the subject of As the Woman Lay Dreaming. And in a way, that's what I'm also writing about, is the kind of, you know, the knock-on effect of that.
Moving on from it.
Yeah. But I found it very demanding. Of all books I've written, it's probably the most demanding, because there was an awful lot of research you could do, and, you know, for instance, the role of Scottish people particularly in the car factories and trade unions in Detroit, and, you know, particularly Detroit, but also Chicago. I thought there's a lot of work. I would love somebody else to take up bits of that and roll with it. I thought, it was really
It's funny again, because when we were over in Barga, that's what we're doing. We're looking at the villas that have been, there's women put on a display of all the villas down the road in Barga where people had, again, after it was the Second World War, but the First World War as well, just through poverty and sickened, you know, by everything. And it was Chicago they went to, most of them went to Chicago or here, actually.
Yes.
And one went to the Shetland Islands. So that was we couldn't hardly believe that one of the families from went to make ice cream in the Shetlands. I don't know. It's just the world is such a melting pot and we're lucky that we're our research and chats. You know,
when I was growing up in Stornoway, we had 3 Italian cafes. Quite remarkable, you know. So it's And there's another story that is waiting to be told there, which is about the sinking of the Allandora Star, which had a knock-on effect too on the Hebrides. You know, because most of the you know, well, there was an awful lot washed ashore in Ireland, but also you know, Colonsay and Barra and Hughes, they had men washed up, you know, largely Italian men. There's a lot of stories to be told. You know, they're not
hard. It's very hard work for you because the research of that is a dark place. When you do research with your heart and empathizing with it all and trying to get into it properly, you're in a very dark place during that time.
Yeah, and the thing, when I was doing the Islair novel, I found that particularly, you know, and well, actually talking about it afterwards was kind of, people would ask you questions. How do people deal with trauma? And you know, of that scale, and you know, they would say, you know, I'm from Northern Ireland. How do we deal with it? And that's one of the questions I remember being asked at Wigton Book Festival. And others, you know, somebody asked me, you know, about even Aberfan was mentioned in the question. And you're thinking, I can't answer that, you know, can't possible. You know, every community has to work that one out, but it does tend to take 100 years for a community to rise again from that kind of event. You know, Eyemouth, where you've got people, you know, there were about 200 men also killed, fishermen. Yeah, and it took over 100 years for the population to rise again.
And maybe it's only then that they can write about it.
And maybe it's only then they can
write time to get by. But I think, you know, when you're saying you're going into all these dark places, I'm so happy that you can, no wonder that you've got the light. And you're quite humorous, you're quite light, and you seem to be, and you know, and all of that darkness. It might be just the carrying of that beam of light that you got as a child all the time just kept you going through it.
I think there's a lot of that, and I think also I learned to be a very good actor when I was young, when I was a child, and I think that helps. I think as a teacher, I was a teacher for, as I say, over 30 years, and I think one of the skills you need as a teacher is to be an actor. Yes.
100%. 100%. Anyway, I would love to, I'm going to pick up this new book that comes out, the stories, when it comes next week. I'll try and get that. And I would love to just thank you very much, Donald, for coming on and sharing your stories and sharing the stories of your community and your work and your poetry. Thank you very much.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
So, Donna, do you want to come back, say hello?
Yes, I do. Can you see me?
To say, I've loved doing these SCAP things. And SCAP, I founded SCAP last a year and a half ago or something, and it's grown arms and legs, and we're quite exhausted and all that. But that's about, I don't know, the photography class is coming to an end now for this session. The flamenco dancing's going on. What a laugh that is. Donna and I are taking the class, and we're stamping about every day, and just we're buying the shoes and the red dresses and going right overhead with it. But also, I think, you know, we've had really lovely art classes running. I've been doing a bit of singing with people, with Tracy Braithwaite. I've been working Silent Secrets, a whole lot of work, and they're all coming now to the end for this session. And then we start again probably late August into September to run through them again. But these online sessions, they would be quiet if we continued them now because people want out. But I hope when we record these, go on and look at the recordings. It gives other people a chance. That was a fabulous session. It was just so northern and watery and islandy. I loved it. What did you think, Donna?
I loved it as well. It was just, and Donald there speaking about the islands and that, and a lot of the history, and I think as well, like lighthouses, there's a mystique surrounds lighthouses. There's something, I'm not going to say there's a loneliness to them, but it's like they're very much alive. So they are lighthouses. Tonight has been absolutely just again another great night for SCAP Writers in the Room. So we're the next SCAP Writers in the Room, we'll be looking at September.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to, we had a live writers in the room at Street Level Gallery last month, and it was the Margaret Mitchell photography exhibition, East of Eden.
An Ordinary Eden.
An Ordinary Eden, East of Eden. Who wrote that?
John Steinbeck.
That's right. That's
Yes,
right.
Steinbeck.
An Ordinary Eden. And that was a great success. It was really, really good. So we're having another live event, aren't we, this
We're
year?
going to have that in September, and we're hoping then we could ask some. We hope Bobby will maybe come along and play some music at that. It might well be in Street Level again. We'll have maybe 3 or 4 of them a year. But you'll have seen I've been trying my best with my media nonsense to put SCAP Scotland everywhere. But I did meet a media kind of expert the other day and says we need one, Linda, we need one, and the website. So if you can, please follow us on SCAP Scotland. The one that's it's got a lilac crane is the profile. August the 26th, 27th. We're glad the classes are coming in, because then we're now going to push for this festival, and I hope you'll join us, encourage. We've got Gaelic going on at it. We've got Scots. We've got Farsi. Because we've got the asylum seekers all reading their work as well. We've got Bernard McLafferty appearing. He's going to read on the Saturday. Gerda Stevenson, Ross Donnan from Australia, Bob Beagley. We've got a fabulous setup. So if you just go on the SCAP Scotland website, you can see. And hopefully when we get back to September, some of you will be up for joining us in the room. But meanwhile, the SCAP Writers in Zoom, please, thank you very much, Hannah, Bobby, Judy and Donald. And I, for one, will be buying everything that I've heard tonight. I loved it, absolutely loved it. So thank you so much from me. And
to everybody. And again, thank you very much. And thank you for coming. Just been another great night and a great way to spend a Thursday evening. So thank you very much.